My name is Amelia, and the story I am about to share begins with a silence so heavy it almost swallowed me whole. Birthdays are supposed to feel special. But that night, as I pushed open the glass doors of my apartment building, the only sound that greeted me was the echo of my heels striking polished marble. The lobby was empty, the kind of empty that reminded you no one was waiting. It was my 32nd birthday. I had just left the Horizon Brands office after another 14-hour marathon. My presentation had ended with a client shaking my hand, praising me as if I had just saved their entire company. It should have been a victory lap. It should have felt like a reason to celebrate. Yet when I pulled out my phone, the screen glared back at me with the same cruel truth. No calls, no messages, no one saying, "Happy birthday, Amelia." I told myself I was fine. A senior PR executive handling multi-million-dollar accounts has no time for childish traditions. But that lie cracked the moment I stepped into my apartment, because there, waiting on the coffee table, was a small cake I had bought myself that morning. One candle, one single, lonely candle, stuck in the middle of white frosting. I sank onto the couch, leather briefcase at my side, heels kicked off without care. My apartment, carefully decorated to feel like home, suddenly seemed like a stage set, pretty, but hollow. The clock ticked toward midnight, reminding me that time, like family, does not wait. I whispered happy birthday to me, into the stillness. The words floated in the air unanswered. I reached for my laptop, thinking maybe I would bury the ache under more work, but my fingers betrayed me. They opened Facebook, and that was when the knife turned. The first image froze me, my brother Miles, glass of champagne raised high. His smile wide, his shoulders flanked by our parents. A banner behind him read, "Congratulations on your promotion." I scrolled each swipe, cutting deeper. Aunts, uncles, cousins I had not seen in years, all there gathered in celebration. My father's caption read, "So proud of our superstar." My mother's comment, "The Edwards family legacy continues." On my birthday, the timing was not coincidence, it was choice. And once again, I was the choice not made. The betrayal sent me spinning back to 11 years old. I had been left alone at a restaurant table, a birthday candle melting into frosting, as I waited for them to return from Miles's debate competition. At 17, shipped to Grandma's house while my parents toured Yale with Miles. At 21, my college graduation party derailed when Miles announced his engagement. Every milestone of mine had been swallowed by his shadow, and tonight was no different. I shut the laptop, trembling. My eyes burned not with tears, but with recognition. They had not forgotten me. They never forget. They simply choose Miles every single time. For 32 years, I had believed that if I worked harder, shined brighter, maybe they would turn their heads. Maybe they would see me. But the truth hit sharp. I was invisible by design. That night, staring at that small cake with its unlit candle, I felt something shift. A whisper in the silence, a warning, or perhaps a promise. This was the last time I would let them erase me. And if you have ever felt overlooked on the day that was supposed to celebrate you, then you already know how heavy that silence is. Before I take you deeper into this story, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and let's see how many voices we can gather together here. Because this is not just my story, it might be yours too. The morning after that hollow birthday, I woke with the weight of old memories pressing down on me. I thought about all the times I had been told to step aside, to understand, to be patient. My name is Amelia, and I had grown up as the background character in my own family's story. At 11 years old, I sat alone in a diner booth, waiting with a melting cupcake. My parents had promised they would be back in time from Miles's debate competition. They never came. At 17, while other girls had birthday sleepovers filled with balloons and laughter, I was packed off to Grandma's house because my parents wanted to tour Yale with Miles. I still remember Dad's words, "It's his future, Amelia. You'll understand one day." At 21, when I graduated summa cum laude, my celebration dinner turned into Miles's engagement party. The clink of champagne glasses wasn't for my honors, it was for his wedding plans. It wasn't just birthdays. It was every milestone, every achievement, every effort I made to prove myself. My college graduation, my first apartment, my promotion to senior PR executive, each moment was brushed aside as just advertising, or not as important as finance. When I pulled off a campaign that boosted a client's revenue by 41%, Dad didn't even look up from his watch. That's nice, Amelia. But it's not like what Miles does. Finance makes a real impact. Those words carved scars deeper than any silence. That morning, as the memories piled up, I finally admitted a truth I had resisted for decades. They didn't just forget me, they never intended to see me. Their spotlight was fixed on Miles, and I was expected to live in the shadows. The realization was bitter, yet it was also liberating. I poured myself coffee, staring out my apartment window at the Chicago skyline, and whispered, I can't keep waiting. The city outside was alive with ambition, with people hustling for recognition. Why couldn't I demand the same for myself? Still the ache lingered. I scrolled through my phone, searching for a message that wasn't there. No aunt, no uncle, not even a token happy birthday from my parents. I wondered, was I really invisible, or had they all decided that ignoring me was easier than admitting the truth of their favoritism? For years I had convinced myself that family was supposed to be unconditional, that if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, they would finally love me as much as they loved him. But watching the Facebook photos of that party, those smiling faces celebrating Miles on my birthday, shattered the illusion. The scales fell from my eyes. That morning became a turning point. The cake on the table was stale by then, untouched. I threw it away, not because I didn't want sweetness, but because I refused to swallow pity any longer. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've worked yourself to exhaustion, hoping someone would finally look at you and say, I'm proud. Maybe you've waited for a text, a call, a gesture that never came. If that sounds familiar, then take a second. Now tell me in the comments. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Share your story. You'll be surprised how many people will understand exactly what you mean. Because here's what I learned that morning. Recognition doesn't always come from the people you expect. Sometimes it never comes at all, but that doesn't mean your worth is any less. It means you have to decide if you're willing to keep begging for crumbs or if you're ready to build your own table. That day, the question settled heavy in my chest. For 32 years, I had been waiting for my family to see me. Would I spend 32 more in the same silence? The clock ticked past noon sunlight spilling across my apartment floor. And for the first time, I thought maybe it's time to stop waiting. Maybe it's time to choose myself. But I had no idea that the phone call coming that evening would test that resolve in ways I had never imagined. That evening, I tried to bury myself in work again. My laptop glowed with spreadsheets and drafts, but none of the words on the screen could drown out the emptiness in my chest. My phone buzzed suddenly. For a second, my heart leapt. I thought maybe someone remembered. It was my mother. I answered too quickly, my voice betraying a little hope. Amelia, darling, she said with a cheerful tone. I'm so glad I caught you. We're planning something for Miles and Jessica's anniversary next month. I was hoping you could help with the catering and decorations. You're so good at that sort of thing. I froze. Midnight had just struck. My birthday was officially over. Not once had she mentioned it. My voice cracked when I said, Mom, today was my birthday. There was a pause. Then she laughed lightly, as if brushing away an inconvenient detail. Oh, honey, with Miles's big promotion, it just slipped her mind, like it always did. My hands trembled as I held the phone. The cake I had thrown away earlier came back to me in a flash. A single candle. A single person who remembered me. That was it. When I hung up, something hardened inside me. I stared at my laptop screen where an email still glowed. My bonus for the Horizon campaign, $82,000. The largest check of my life. And at that moment, I understood. My family would never celebrate me. Not once, not ever. If I wanted recognition, I had to carve it for myself. But before I could process this revelation, another blow landed. A few days later at work, I stumbled into a group chat I wasn't supposed to see. Mom had accidentally included my email. Messages sprawled across the screen like cuts on my skin. Amelia should contribute at least $20,000 to the anniversary gift my father wrote. It's time she supports the family. She just got that bonus, my mother replied. Perfect timing. And there it was, my own parents reducing me to a bank account. Worse, my name spelled wrong. Quinn with one N, a mistake a stranger would make. My office chair creaked as I leaned back staring at the Chicago skyline through the window. In that moment, I realized with brutal clarity I wasn't just overlooked. I was being used. My achievements, my bonus, my contacts. Everything I worked for, they saw it as theirs to claim. The betrayal burned, yet mixed with it was something sharper. A new kind of fire. For the first time, I was beginning to see my life not as a tragedy but as a case. Evidence stacked up, patterns too obvious to ignore. And maybe you felt it too. That moment when disappointment turns into resolve. When you stop begging for recognition and start gathering proof. Tell me if this were you, would you confront your family head-on, or would you walk away in silence? Drop your answer below. Your words might be the mirror someone else needs tonight. Because I was done swallowing their excuses. Done pretending forgetting was accidental. Done letting them write me out of the story I worked so hard to build. That evening, my best friend Jennifer noticed my pale face and asked, "Everything okay?" I showed her the chat. Her jaw tightened. "Amelia, that's messed up. They don't deserve you." Her words lit something in me. For the first time, I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend my parents. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Still, I had no idea how far this fight would go. No idea that soon I'd be standing in my parents' mansion facing them down like a prosecutor with evidence. But in that moment, one thing was certain: I would never let them steal my worth again. But the storm was only beginning. The following week, the tension only grew heavier. I sat at my desk in Horizon's glass-walled conference room trying to prepare for an upcoming client meeting, but my mind kept circling back to that family group chat. My parents had reduced me to a wallet. My own name had been misspelled. And now, as if to prove how little boundaries meant to them, my brother Miles had begun circling even closer to my world. Jennifer, my colleague, and one of the few people who truly understood me, walked into my office. Her curls bounced as she leaned over my desk. "Miles used our contacts at Regentech again," she said grimly. "Pulled their marketing director into a meeting for his firm, without asking." I blinked. This is the third time. She folded her arms. "And your father thinks you should just hand him $20,000 on top of that." She shook her head. "It's outrageous." I wanted to argue, to make excuses, but the words stuck in my throat. Because she was right. My family wasn't just ignoring me, they were feeding off me. My bonus, my work, my connections, every ounce of value I built was theirs to claim. That afternoon, Lawrence Chen, our CEO, stopped by my office. He slid a folder across the desk with a rare smile. "The Westfield campaign numbers are in. 41% increase in quarterly revenue. The board is ecstatic." His pride felt warm, solid, and real. "This is why I fought for your bonus," he added. "You've earned every penny." For a moment, I nearly crumbled under the contrast. Here was a man who had no obligation to me celebrating my success with genuine appreciation. And yet, in the same breath, my own parents saw me only as a financial tool. That night my phone buzzed again. It was Miles calling about yet another favor. His voice carried that entitled smoothness. "Amelia, I need you to get Regentech's chief marketing officer to attend our dinner tomorrow. It's important. Family helping family, right?" I clenched the phone, swallowing the anger. "I'll see what I can do," I said flatly. For once I didn't rush to deliver. I didn't promise. Later, as I walked down the hall of my apartment building, I stopped at the familiar door of Mrs. Bennett, my 84-year-old neighbor. She opened with her usual smile, the smell of fresh cookies drifting out. "Right on time," she said. We had our Tuesday ritual. She baked, I brought takeout, and together we shared stories across her checkered tablecloth. That evening I told her everything, about the group chat, about Miles stealing contacts, about the $20,000 they demanded. Her hand wrinkled yet strong covered mine. "Some parents never see their children clearly," she said gently. "They only see their own reflection." Her words landed deeper than she knew. Because for the first time I saw it too. My parents weren't blind. They simply chose not to look. And maybe you've had someone like that in your life. Someone who never noticed you, no matter how loud your achievements rang. If that's you, pause for a moment, drop a comment right now. Tell me, have you ever felt like nothing you did was enough? Sharing it here might remind someone else they're not alone. That night back in my apartment, I stood at the window overlooking the city lights. Miles would call again, my parents would demand again. The cycle would repeat unless I decided to break it. The bitterness that had simmered for years began to transform into something else. Resolve. For 32 years, I had played the quiet daughter, the easy scapegoat. But now my evidence was stacking higher than their excuses. The time was coming when I would lay it all out before them. Photos, numbers, memories, and force them to face the truth. I didn't know how far it would go. I didn't know how much it would cost me. But I knew one thing: the next time they asked me for $20,000, my answer would not be silence. The showdown was closer than I realized. The following Saturday evening, the Edwards family mansion glowed like a palace on Lakeshore Drive. 3 stories of stone-lit windows gleaming against the darkening sky. I parked my car with hands trembling on the wheel. This was not just dinner, it was a test. Inside, my mother fluttered around flower arrangements, pearls catching the light. My father stood with his Scotch glass already setting the tone of command. Miles and Jessica lounged on the leather sofa, perfectly composed like models from a glossy magazine spread. Dinner unfolded like a performance I had seen 1,000 times. My father spoke of Miles's recent promotion with booming pride. My mother added charming anecdotes. Laughter rose, but I only pushed salmon around my plate, waiting for the inevitable. It came with dessert. My father set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. Amelia, we need to discuss your contribution to Miles and Jessica's anniversary celebration. $20,000 would cover the venue and catering. As the only one with a recent windfall, it's appropriate. My mother nodded quickly, earrings swaying. Family supports, family darling. The words pierced me. When had they ever supported me? When had they ever lifted a finger for my milestones, my achievements? I lifted my head and said quietly, I can't. The room froze. My father's brows furrowed. I beg your pardon. I can't contribute $20,000. That's a quarter of my bonus. I have other plans. Silence thickened, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock. My parents had never heard me say no. My father's voice dropped lower, edged with fury. What plans could possibly matter more than your brother's celebration? My future, I answered simply. My mother's face crumpled into rehearsed tears. After all we've done for you, she whispered, shaking her head. The performance was flawless, designed to flood me with guilt. But this time I pushed back. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. What exactly have you done for me? My father slammed his chair back, towering over the table. I will not tolerate ingratitude in this house. Your brother is the real achiever. The least you can do is support his success. Those words landed like arrows. But instead of collapsing, I found myself standing. My legs shook, but my voice steadied. I need to go. My mother reached for my arm. Amelia, please don't make a scene. For once, I didn't smooth things over. I didn't swallow my feelings. I pulled free, grabbed my purse, and walked out. The night air hit me like freedom and terror all at once. My heart pounded. My breath came fast, but I felt something new: resolution. For the first time in 32 years, I had drawn a boundary. And maybe you've had to do it too. Maybe you've had to stand at a table surrounded by people who claim to love you and finally say no. If you have ever walked away rather than break yourself to please others, write it in the comments. Your courage could remind someone else they are not weak for leaving. That drive home was the longest of my life. Every mile was heavy with guilt, but also lit with a spark I hadn't felt before. I had told them no. And even though it terrified me, it felt right. Still, I knew the fight was only beginning. My parents had spent decades training me to obey, to serve, to fade into Miles's shadow. They weren't going to accept this rebellion quietly, but as I pulled into my apartment's garage, a single thought anchored me: I had chosen myself. And once you choose yourself, it's impossible to unsee that truth. The storm I had unleashed inside that mansion would not fade. It was only gathering force, and I was no longer running from it. The days after that dinner felt like a war fought through phone lines. Every morning at 7:15 sharp, my phone lit up with my mother's number. I started leaving it in the bathroom while I brewed coffee, just so I wouldn't hear it vibrate. When I did answer, her voice poured through the speaker like syrup masking poison. "Amelia, sweetie," she said one morning, "this rebellious phase needs to end. Your father hasn't slept properly since that dinner. You're breaking our hearts." I stood in front of the mirror, mascara wand paused midair. "Mom, I'm not rebellious. I'm 32. Her gasp was sharp. "How can you say that? After everything we've sacrificed for you." The word stuck in my throat, sacrificed. I thought about the empty chairs, the forgotten birthdays, the years of being pushed aside. "What exactly have you sacrificed for me?" The silence that followed was real. For once, she had no rehearsed line. I hung up before she could find one. By afternoon, my father stormed into Horizon's lobby. His presence filled the space like a storm cloud. Jennifer caught my eye across the floor and mouthed code red. I intercepted him near reception. "Dad, this is my workplace." "Then you should act like a professional," he snapped, his voice carrying. Curious eyes turned toward us from cubicles. "Professionals honor their family obligations." "Lower your voice," I hissed, pulling him into a small conference room. My hands trembled, but I held the door steady. "What do you want?" "Your mother hasn't stopped crying," he said, stabbing the air with his finger. "Is that what you wanted to punish us because we missed one birthday?" The dismissal sliced me open. One birthday. Try 20 years of them. Try graduations, promotions, every success stolen or ignored. "This isn't about one birthday," I shot back. "It's about every single time you erased me." He waved me off. "You exaggerate. The point is, Miles deserves our support. 20,000 from your bonus is more than fair." At that moment, my phone buzzed with an emergency alert from our biggest client. A real crisis. Real responsibility. "I have to handle this," I said. "This conversation isn't finished, Amelia," he warned. But for me it was. I shut the door behind me, my hands trembling, my heart racing, but my voice was steady as I dialed the client. For the next 3 hours, I poured every ounce of myself into crisis management. When it was over, I stood before the executive team, presenting the plan that saved a $3 million account. My voice did not waver once. "Extraordinary work," our CEO told me, clapping my shoulder. "You just saved this company." The praise felt like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. At work, I was valued. At home, I was an afterthought unless I was giving. The contrast was so stark it hurt. When I finally checked my phone, there were 6 missed calls from Miles. A text glared back at me, "Mom's crying every night because of you. Fix this." Fix. That was their word. As if I were the problem to patch the wound to hide. I silenced the phone. For once, I refused to fix what I didn't break. And maybe you face that too, being blamed for the cracks someone else created. If you've ever been told to fix what was never yours to fix, share your story in the comments. Let's shine light on the truth together. That night, I sat alone at my dining table, papers from the client spread out before me. Pride mingled with exhaustion. I had proven my worth in the place where it mattered most. But at home, the war was escalating. I knew my parents wouldn't stop. They would drag me back if they could. I looked at the city lights and whispered, "Not this time." The decision was forming inside me, hard and steady. If they wanted me to contribute $20,000, they would soon discover that my answer was far greater than no. It was a new life entirely. And the first step toward that new life would be the boldest move I had ever made. The week after that confrontation felt like walking across a tightrope stretched over fire. Every call from my family was another gust of wind trying to knock me down. I stopped answering most of them, but the voicemails stacked up, filled with guilt threats and pleas. 3 weeks after my birthday, I sat alone in a corner cafe with my laptop open. A slice of carrot cake sat half-eaten beside me. Across the room, a group of friends laughed around a young woman wearing a paper crown. They cheered as she blew out candles, gifts piled high on the table. The sound should have made me smile. Instead, it hollowed me out. Watching them, I realized something I had always tried to deny. I would never have that kind of joy with my family. No matter how hard I worked, no matter what heights I climbed, they would never see me the way they saw Miles. They had decided who mattered and who didn't, and I was permanently placed in the latter category. That truth settled heavy, but clear. and for the first time, instead of breaking me, it propelled me. I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, Lakefront Property, Michigan. Dozens of listings appeared. My eyes landed on a 4-bedroom house with wide windows overlooking the water. A wooden deck wrapped around 3 sides. Pine trees offered privacy. The asking price, $365,000. As I clicked through the photos, something swelled in my chest. This could be mine, my refuge, my sanctuary. The next morning, I called the realtor. 2 days later, I stood on the deck, the lake sparkling before me, autumn leaves drifting across the yard. The owners were motivated sellers already moving to Arizona. When the realtor asked if I wanted time to think, I shook my head. No, I'll take it. Signing those papers felt like signing my independence. Each signature was a declaration I choose myself. For years, my life had been defined by their neglect. Now it would be defined by my choice. Mrs. Bennett came with me to the closing. She patted my hand, eyes shining. "You're doing the right thing, dear. Sometimes we have to build our own sanctuary." I smiled steady for the first time in weeks. She was right. That weekend, I walked through the empty rooms of my new house. Slowly, I began filling them with my story. I hung framed awards and photos of real celebrations, team victories, campaign launches, magazine features. The master bedroom became my favorite space. I placed a reading chair by the window, stacked books I had always wanted to read, and bought the softest bedding I could find. On the door, I hung a small wooden sign, "The Birthday Suite." It was more than a room, it was a promise to myself. And maybe you've reached that moment too. The point where you realize waiting for approval is killing you. So let me ask you, if you had the chance to build your own sanctuary, what would it look like? Would it be by the water in the mountains, or maybe in the heart of a busy city? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your vision. Because here's the truth I learned: freedom doesn't always come in one grand act. Sometimes it comes in small choices, signing papers, hanging curtains, planting roots in a place that is yours alone. That night, as I sat on the deck with a glass of wine, the Michigan sunset painted the lake in amber and rose. My phone buzzed again, calls, texts, demands, but I left it inside. For the first time, their voices didn't reach me. The silence was no longer heavy, it was peaceful. And it whispered a new truth I was no longer theirs to erase. Alright, but I knew it wouldn't end there. The Edwards family was not going to let me walk away without a fight, and I was ready. The lake house quickly became more than just a property, it became the first place that truly felt like mine. Every weekend I drove north each mile, putting distance between me and the demands of my family. The walls filled with laughter from colleagues and friends, people who celebrated me, not for what I could give, but for who I was. One Sunday I invited Jennifer, a few coworkers, and of course Mrs. Bennett. We grilled steaks on the deck, the air sweet with wood smoke and corn roasting over the coals. Someone brought a portable speaker, music floated across the water, and for the first time in years, I felt surrounded by real family. We toasted with wine glasses raised not to Miles or any so-called legacy, but to me, to Amelia, to the life I was building. That night after everyone left, I sat on the deck in the quiet. The lake shimmered silver under the moon, and my phone buzzed inside the house. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages. My mother's name appeared over and over, desperate and frantic. I silenced the ringer and slipped the phone into my pocket. Not today. The next morning, the messages turned darker. "Where did you get the money for a house?" my mother demanded. "This is irresponsible behavior." Another voicemail came from my father. "You are embarrassing this family. People are asking questions we cannot answer." Questions. That word stuck in my head. My family didn't care about my happiness, they cared about appearances. To them, my lake house wasn't a symbol of independence, it was a threat. A reminder that I could exist outside their control. By midweek, the gossip machine was in full swing. Cousins called, their voices dripping with concern but fueled by curiosity. One whispered, "Everyone's talking about you, Amelia. They think you're hiding money, or maybe you're jealous of Miles." I laughed, a sound that surprised even me, because for the first time the rumors didn't sting. They only revealed the truth: my family would rather invent lies than admit they had neglected me. That Saturday, I hosted my first real housewarming. Jennifer arrived with flowers. My boss brought a bottle of Cabernet with a handwritten note to celebrating yourself. Mrs. Bennett carried a quilt made of blue and green fabric scraps. Every home needs something handmade with love, she said, wrapping me in a hug. Tears pricked my eyes as I looked around. Laughter bubbled from the kitchen, music pulsed from the deck, the smell of barbecue drifted through the air. These were the moments I had been starved of for decades, moments of genuine connection of people who showed up, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. I posted photos from that evening, smiling faces, golden sunsets, the quilt spread across my bed. Each image was a quiet declaration, this is my family now. The absence of my parents and Miles was deliberate, and it spoke louder than any caption could. And maybe you felt that too, the power of chosen family. The people who remind you that blood is not the only bond that matters. So here's my question for you who in your life has shown up when others disappeared. Write their name in the comments and honor them here. Let them know they matter. As the night faded and my friends left, I stood on the deck with a final glass of wine. The lake whispered against the shore, the stars bright and endless. My phone buzzed again, another message from my father. Answer immediately. Where did you get house money? I turned the phone face down and watched the horizon instead. For once, I felt no need to answer. Because the truth was simple, I didn't owe them anything anymore. But I knew their silence wouldn't last. They would find a way to drag me back into their world of guilt and control. And when they did, I would be ready with something they never expected evidence. The invitation arrived in the most predictable way through a voicemail laced with guilt. My mother's voice trembled, but the script was clear. Amelia, there will be a family dinner this Sunday. We need to fix this misunderstanding. Your father and I will explain everything to the relatives. We'll make it right. Fix. That word again. Fix the image, not the truth. I listened twice, then deleted it. A few days later, I called back. I'm available Tuesday, I said, my tone flat. 7 o'clock. There was silence on the other end. Tuesday, she repeated, as if the idea of me setting terms was foreign. Yes, and I'll bring the photo albums. What photo albums? The ones I've been keeping since I was 11, I answered, documenting everything. For once, she had nothing to say. That Tuesday evening, I walked up the granite steps of my parents' mansion, clutching 3 heavy albums against my chest. The air smelled of manicured roses and old stone, the kind of wealth that had always felt more like a cage than a home. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key. Tonight, I wasn't their daughter, I was a prosecutor carrying evidence. My father opened the door, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the albums. You're late, he said, stepping aside without warmth. In the foyer, my mother stood with tissues already clutched in her hand. Her eyes were rimmed red makeup, carefully applied to look like she'd been crying without smudging. Miles appeared from the living room, drink in hand. He froze when he saw me, his confidence faltering. The dining table gleamed with china and silver. Candles flickered as though trying to cast warmth over a battlefield. I set the albums on the sideboard, their weight thudding against the wood. Dinner began with small talk, my father listing Miles's accomplishments, my mother chiming in with polished anecdotes. I let them speak. Let them weave the story they always told. Then when plates were cleared, I pushed back my chair. Let's stop pretending, I said. My voice didn't tremble. You didn't call me here to share a meal. You called me here to silence me. My father's knife paused mid-air. Amelia, this reckless spending, this lake house, it reflects poorly on our family. You're damaging the Edwards name. My bonus money, I corrected calmly. Money I earned? Money you never once congratulated me for. The air turned brittle. Miles cleared his throat. No one's saying you can't have nice things, but maybe selling it would restore peace. I looked at him evenly. Peace for who? My mother dabbed her dry eyes. You're breaking my heart, Amelia. I rose, walked to the sideboard, and lifted the first album. Pages filled with photos of Miles in party hats, Miles blowing out candles, Miles surrounded by towers of gifts. I slid it across the table, turned to page 16. He hesitated, then obeyed. There he was at 18, standing beside a new car with a giant bow. My father handing him the keys, my mother weeping with joy. I pulled out the second album. This one was nearly empty. A few scattered snapshots me with a store-bought cupcake, me sitting alone. There was nothing to fill it with, I said. On my 21st birthday, you were at Miles's engagement party, remember? No one spoke. The third album revealed family vacations, Disney World, the Grand Canyon, Europe. Miles smiling in every shot. My absence was deafening. I wasn't there because there wasn't enough money for everyone, I said. At least that's what you told me. The silence stretched taut and unbearable. My father slammed his chair back. What's the point of this melodrama? The point, I said, placing a spreadsheet on the table, is evidence. Thousands spent on Miles, hundreds on me, year after year. You can't call this exaggeration. And maybe you felt that moment too, the instant you finally put the truth on the table and refused to let anyone sweep it away. Tell me, if you had the chance to confront the people who erased you, would you do it, or would you walk away? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to hear your courage. As my family sat frozen, I gathered the papers back into my arms, but I left the albums behind. They weren't mine to carry anymore. I stood tall, my voice clear. I don't need your approval. I don't need your love. I waited 32 years for you to see me. I'm done waiting. And with that, I walked out. Come. The quiet click of the door behind me echoed like thunder. The night I left those albums behind, I thought I might finally find peace. But peace is never granted so easily when you've lived under someone else's shadow for 3 decades. A year later, on my 33rd birthday, I woke up in my lake house to sunlight dancing across the water and the smell of fresh fruit I had arranged for my guests. This year would be different. Jennifer had insisted on bringing a cake with 33 candles plus one for luck. My colleagues from Horizon were arriving with trays of pastries and bottles of wine. Mark from marketing carried a platter of croissants, grinning as he set them down. My deck filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and warm voices that carried none of the judgment I had grown up with. This time I wasn't alone with a stale cupcake. I was surrounded by people who valued me for who I was. The promotion to senior director had come just the day before. My phone buzzed with congratulatory texts from coworkers, not family, and the timing felt poetic. Dr. Lavish, my therapist, had once told me that breaking generational patterns takes courage. That courage looked like choosing Vermont over my parents' house for Thanksgiving. It looked like muting family group texts when they turned manipulative. And most of all, it looked like standing here on this deck, celebrating myself without apology. Jennifer raised her mimosa glass. To the birthday girl who taught us all how to choose ourselves. Cheers rang out, glasses clinked, and for the first time I felt celebrated without condition. But the moment wasn't immune from shadows. A car door slammed out front, and the sound of a familiar BMW engine silenced the crowd. Miles stepped onto the deck holding a wrapped package. The conversations dimmed. All eyes turned. Sorry to crash, he said, his voice lower than usual. I wanted to give you this in person. The air tightened. It had been a year since the confrontation with the albums. A year since he had watched the family narrative crumble. My instinct was to send him away to protect the sanctuary I had built. But something in his eyes held me still. Join us, I said finally, and to my surprise I meant it. Later, after the party had moved inside, Miles and I sat together at the end of the dock. The wrapped package rested between us. He stared out at the horizon where a sailboat cut across the lake. Therapy's been eye-opening, he admitted. Dad won't go, but Mom's trying. She talks about you differently now. I studied him carefully. And you? He nodded slowly. I never saw it until you showed us. How they erased you while spotlighting me. I didn't want to admit it, but you were right. He pushed the package toward me. Open it. Inside was a framed photograph I had never seen before me at 7 years old, perched on our old tire swing, laughing at something beyond the camera. Just me, not Miles, not anyone else. I found it in Dad's storage boxes, he explained. Had it restored. Proof you existed even when nobody was looking. My throat tightened. It wasn't a solution, not by far, but it was a beginning. And maybe you've been there too, when someone who once benefited from your silence finally acknowledges the truth. If you've ever had someone surprise you with a moment of real recognition, even after years of being ignored, share that moment in the comments. It might remind someone else that change is possible even if it comes late. As twilight painted the lake in amber and rose, I held the photograph to my chest. The laughter frozen in that image felt like a promise that the girl I once was hadn't disappeared. She had always been here waiting to be seen. But the night wasn't over. A knock at the door would soon test just how much progress my family was truly capable of. The knock at the door came just as the last of the laughter from my birthday toast faded into the walls. Through the glass, I saw a figure standing on the porch, clutching a small white bakery box. My mother. The room went silent. Even Miles froze, his shoulders stiffening. I walked to the door, every step heavy with memories of slammed phones and guilt-laced messages. When I opened it, her hands trembled. "Happy birthday, Amelia," she whispered. Her smile faltered, less rehearsed than usual, more fragile. She held out the box. Inside was a single cupcake with one candle. Carrot cake. "You always liked that, didn't you?" For a second I couldn't speak. I thought of the countless birthdays forgotten, the cakes that never came, the candles never lit. And now here she was, holding one tiny symbol of recognition, decades late, but real. "The party's winding down," I said carefully. "You can stay for cake if you'd like." Her relief was visible, like a weight falling from her chest. She stepped inside, eyes darting around at my friends, my colleagues, at the life I had built without her. For once, she wasn't the center of attention. Later, after everyone had left, I walked down to the dock alone. The quilt Mrs. Bennet had given me draped across my shoulders, the lake rippling under the night sky. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who wrote in her diary at 9 years old. Maybe next year they'll remember my birthday without Grandma calling to remind them. That girl had finally been remembered. Not perfectly, not fully, but remembered. It didn't erase the years of neglect. It didn't undo the pain of being invisible. But it was a crack in the wall that had stood between us. A small step, maybe even a beginning. Miles joined me on the dock, hands in his pockets. "She begged me to tell her where you lived," he admitted quietly. "I only gave her the address this morning." I studied his face, searching for the brother I had resented for so long. "Why now?" "Because I saw what you built here," he said, gesturing to the house behind us. "And I realized you were right all along. You didn't need their approval, and neither do I." The water lapped gently against the wood. For once there was no competition between us. Just two siblings staring at the horizon, both trying to untangle themselves from the same legacy. I lifted the framed photograph he had given me earlier, the one of me at 7 years old. "She remembered this time," I said softly. "That has to count for something." He nodded. "It does. And maybe you've lived through something similar, the small steps that don't erase the past, but whisper of healing. Tell me, if someone from your past showed up with a gesture, this small, would you accept it as progress, or would you shut the door? I'd love to hear what you'd do. Your perspective might help someone else decide." As the night deepened, I felt the tension ease from my shoulders. My mother's cupcake was not a solution, but it was proof that even the most stubborn patterns could shift, if only a little. Back inside, I set the cupcake on the kitchen counter, one candle waiting to be lit. I didn't need it anymore, not the way I once had. But when I struck the match and watched the flame flicker, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. This wasn't the end of the story. It was another step in a long journey. A journey of boundaries, forgiveness, and learning to celebrate myself, no matter who remembered. The lake shimmered outside the house, glowing behind me, and for the first time I allowed myself to wonder, could I build something new with them, even after everything? The following weeks passed in a blur of contradictions. At work, my life thrived. The lake house filled with laughter on weekends, sunlight streaming across polished wood floors. Yet in quiet moments, I replayed the image of my mother standing on my porch with that cupcake. One candle, one fragile offering. Was it enough? Could I trust it? Therapy sessions helped me untangle the knot. Dr. Levine leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "A gesture can be genuine, Amelia," he said, "but you must decide if it erases the years behind it, or if it's only a beginning." I knew the answer. The cupcake didn't erase anything, but maybe it cracked the door to something new. Still, cracks can let in light, or let old shadows creep back. The Edwards family wasn't done. Rumors swirled again. My father's text arrived one evening, sharp and commanding. "There will be a family dinner. We will explain this was all a misunderstanding. You will attend. The old Amelia would have gone without question, desperate to smooth things over, but not anymore. I dialed instead of replying. I'll come, I said, but on one condition. I bring the photo albums. His pause was heavy. What albums? You'll see. On Tuesday, I walked into that house not as the daughter desperate for approval, but as the woman ready to speak her truth. The albums were stacked in my arms, heavy but steady. Each page a record of what had been stolen from me. The dining room glittered with polished silver and candlelight as if they thought a fancy setting could disguise the battlefield underneath. My father cleared his throat. Amelia, this reckless behavior with the house, it reflects poorly on the family image. I placed the first album on the table and opened it. Miles at birthdays, surrounded by gifts, smiles, cameras. Page after page of celebration. Look, I said, my voice calm. Every year remembered. The second album fell open to near blank pages. A cupcake here, a faded photo there. Silence on paper. This is mine, I said. There was nothing to put in it. My mother's hands trembled as she turned the empty pages. Finally, I opened the third vacations trips, Disneyland Europe. All with Miles. Never me. You told me there wasn't enough money, but clearly there was. The silence was suffocating. My father slammed his fork down. Enough melodrama. No, I said firmly, enough lies. And maybe you've had to do it too. Lay evidence on the table, force people to face what they'd rather ignore. So let me ask you, if you had one chance to prove the truth to those who dismissed you, would you take it? Or would you walk away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your answer might give courage to someone who needs it. That night, for the first time in my life, my father admitted it aloud. Fine. We favored Miles. He was always the priority. My mother's eyes filled with real tears. We didn't mean to. It just happened. But I had waited 32 years for those words, and I was done waiting. I stood gathering the albums into my arms. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your excuses. When I left that house, the air felt cold but clear. The albums pressed against my chest like armor. For once, I was not carrying their expectations. I was carrying proof. And though the confrontation shook me, it also freed me. The truth was out. The silence was broken. And what came next would test whether those cracks could lead to healing or whether I would finally shut the door forever. A year later, the woman who once sat alone with a store-bought cake was gone. On the morning of my 33rd birthday, sunlight painted gold across the deck of my lake house. I smoothed the red sundress I had chosen, carefully arranged a tray of fruit beside a champagne bucket, and breathed in the crisp Michigan air. This year, I was not forgotten. This year, I was celebrated. My phone buzzed with a flood of congratulatory messages, not from relatives, but from colleagues who valued me. The timing could not have been sweeter. Just yesterday, I had been promoted to senior director. To have my birthday and my career milestone collide felt like a victory the old Amelia could only have dreamed of. Guests began to arrive. Jennifer came first, waving with a grin and carrying a cake crowned with 33 candles plus one for luck. We're lighting every single one, she insisted. Mark from marketing appeared with a tray of pastries, balancing them with exaggerated care. Soon the deck filled with glasses, clinking laughter, ringing voices, calling out my name, not Miles's, mine. Dr. Levine's words came back to me. Breaking generational patterns takes courage. That courage looked like this, standing in my sanctuary, surrounded by people who chose me. It looked like refusing to answer manipulative texts, like celebrating without apology. Jennifer raised her mimosa glass. To Amelia, she declared, the birthday girl who taught us how to choose ourselves. Everyone cheered. Warmth flooded me in a way no staged family dinner ever had. And maybe you felt it too, that moment when you realize real family is found, not assigned. If you've built your own circle, the ones who lift you up instead of weighing you down, hit the subscribe button and stay with me. Because stories like this matter, and we're building a community right here where you're not invisible. The celebration stretched into the afternoon sunlight, spilling across smiling faces. Then the sound of a car door slammed out front. A familiar engine purred in the driveway. Conversations hushed. My pulse quickened. Miles stepped onto the deck, holding a wrapped package. His usual confidence was gone, replaced with something almost uncertain. "Sorry to crash," he said quietly. "I just wanted to give you this in person." The crowd looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I studied him, the brother who had been the star of every birthday. I was denied the man who had benefited from my silence. And yet here, he stood offering something instead of taking. "Join us," I said at last, and to my surprise I meant it. Later, after the party moved indoors, he and I sat side by side at the end of the dock. The water shimmered with streaks of sunset. Between us lay the package unopened. "I've been in therapy," Miles admitted. "It opened my eyes. Dad still won't go, but Mom's trying. She talks about you differently now." I searched his face. "And you?" His gaze met mine. "I never realized how much they erased you until that night with the albums. You were right." He pushed the package toward me. "Open it." Inside was a framed photograph of me at 7 years old, laughing on our old tire swing. No Miles in the frame, no distractions, just me. "I found it in Dad's storage boxes," he explained. "Had it restored. Proof you existed even when nobody was looking." Tears burned my eyes. It wasn't redemption, not yet. But it was something. A beginning. The lake rippled softly, the air thick with things left unsaid. For the first time, I felt the weight of rivalry lift, replaced by fragile possibility. But the night still had one more test. A knock at the lake house door would reveal whether my mother's small cupcake was a fluke or the first sign of something real. The dock creaked softly beneath us as Miles and I sat in silence, the restored photograph resting in my lap. The sky was shifting into twilight, painting the lake in streaks of rose and amber. For the first time in years, my brother wasn't a rival, wasn't the golden child. He was just Miles, someone trying, someone reaching across the gap we had both inherited. But the night had one more chapter. A knock rattled through the house. I glanced toward the deck where the party had moved indoors. Through the glass doors I saw her, my mother standing alone on the porch, clutching a small bakery box like it was her last defense. Miles leaned closer, his voice low. "She begged me to tell her where you lived. I only gave her the address this morning." My breath caught. Part of me wanted to bolt the door to keep this sanctuary untouched. But another part of me, the part that still remembered sitting alone at 11 with a melting cupcake, hesitated. I walked slowly back up the dock, each step deliberate. When I opened the door, her hands were trembling. "Happy birthday, Amelia," she whispered. Her voice cracked, less polished than I'd ever heard it. She held out the box. "Carrot cake. You always loved it, didn't you?" Inside was a single cupcake, a lone candle waiting to be lit. The silence stretched. Behind her eyes was fear, fear of rejection, fear of consequence, maybe even fear of truth. I took the box. "The party's winding down," I said carefully. "You can stay for cake if you'd like." Her relief was immediate. She stepped inside, glancing at the laughter and warmth she had never contributed to. My friends welcomed her politely, though the weight of old wounds hovered in the air. Later, after everyone had left, she sat with me at the kitchen table. The cupcake sat between us. She tried to smile. "I know I wasn't there the way I should have been." Her voice faltered. "I don't know how to fix it." I looked at her, really looked. This was the woman who had dismissed my birthday with a laugh, who had asked for $20,000 while ignoring 32 years of silence. Yet here she was, trying in the only way she knew how. "It isn't about fixing," I said finally. "It's about seeing. For once you saw me." Her eyes glistened. She nodded, words failing her. "And maybe you've stood in that space too, when someone who hurt you deeply extends the smallest of gestures. Would you take it as a beginning, or would you shut the door forever?" Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might guide someone else who's standing on the edge of forgiveness. That night I lit the candle. Not because I needed it, but because the girl I once was deserved to see it glow. My mother and I sat in silence, the flame flickering between us, fragile and unsteady, like the possibility of something new. The years of neglect couldn't be erased by a single cupcake. The scars were too deep, the evidence too heavy. But as I blew out the candle, I realized something important. Healing doesn't have to come all at once. Sometimes it comes in whispers. When she left, the house felt quiet, but not empty. I stood on the deck again, holding the framed photograph Miles had given me earlier. Proof I had always been there even when no one else looked. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, the water steady, unhurried. For the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten child anymore. I felt like the woman who had chosen herself and in doing so had forced everyone else to finally see her. But the journey wasn't done. Birthdays would come and go. Boundaries would be tested again. And I would have to decide again and again whether to let them in or keep the door closed. The morning after the party, I sat on my deck with a cup of coffee staring out over the lake. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt alive. The echoes of laughter still clung to the walls. The quilt Mrs. Bennet had given me rested over the arm of a chair. On the counter inside the cupcake box sat empty, only a smudge of frosting, left as proof that my mother had actually remembered, if only once. A year ago, I had whispered happy birthday to myself in silence. Now I had a home full of people who chose me, and even my family, however awkwardly, was beginning to face the truth. The journey hadn't healed everything, but it had transformed me. By mid-morning, I received a text from Miles. "I'm proud of you. Thank you for letting me come." I stared at it for a long time. Growing up, I had been conditioned to see him as my rival. But here was something different, two adults acknowledging each other, not fighting for scraps of love. The rest of the day passed in simple joys. Friends dropped by with leftovers, neighbors waved from their porches. I hung curtains in the bedroom, planted flowers by the walkway, and realized this house wasn't just shelter. It was a declaration. Every nail, every coat of paint, every framed photo was proof I had built a life on my own terms. That evening I stood on the dock again, the lake glowing with the last light of day. I thought of the albums I had left on my parents' dining table, evidence they could no longer deny. I thought of the photograph Miles had restored, proof that I had existed even in their blind spots. And I thought of the cupcake, small but real, a single candle that had burned away decades of silence. I raised a glass of wine to the horizon. "To choosing myself," I whispered. "And maybe you need that reminder too. Maybe you've been waiting years for someone else to notice you, to validate your worth. Let me say this, don't wait. Choose yourself now. And if you found the courage to do that, already share your story in the comments. Tell us what freedom looks like for you. And if you want more stories like mine, don't forget to subscribe and stay, because we're building something powerful here." The stars began to appear one by one. For the first time in my life, I didn't crave a call from my parents. I didn't ache for their approval. I already had what I needed. When my phone buzzed again, it was a message from Mrs. Bennet. "Did you enjoy your day, dear?" I smiled, typing back quickly. For the first time, I truly celebrated myself. As twilight deepened, I let the phone rest on the arm of the chair. My eyes followed the gentle waves across the lake, the reflection of the house glowing behind me. This was my sanctuary, my freedom, my birthday gift to myself. The girl who once sat forgotten at a restaurant table with a melting candle was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned that validation doesn't come from others, it begins within. I leaned back, the night air cool on my skin, and breathed deeply. For the first time, the silence wasn't painful, it was powerful. And as I watched the horizon fade into stars, I knew this was only the beginning. As I sit here tonight, the lake stretching out before me like a mirror of stars, I think about the journey that brought me here. A journey filled with silence, with shadows, with a family that never seemed to see me. But also a journey filled with choices that led me out of invisibility and into the light of my own life. The house behind me glows with soft lamplight. Inside are reminders of the people who showed up when I needed them. Most friends, colleagues, neighbors who became family. Their laughter lingers in these walls, far louder than the old echoes of neglect. I no longer crave the validation I once begged for. I don't need my parents' approval to define my worth. The albums I left behind told the story they could no longer deny. And while the scars will always remain, they no longer chain me. They remind me of how far I've come. Miles's photograph of me at 7 sits framed on the shelf inside. Proof that even in the years I was ignored, I was still here, still real, still laughing. That girl survived, and she grew into the woman who built this sanctuary by the water. And my mother's cupcake, one candle. One fragile attempt wasn't redemption, but it was a start. Small steps matter. Sometimes healing begins with a whisper, not a roar. So tonight, as I raise my glass once more to the horizon, I leave you with this question. What gift have you given yourself that changed everything? Because when we stop waiting for others to see us, we finally discover the power to see ourselves. Here in this moment, I am no longer invisible. I am free.